I'm a girl who's been living with two guys just off my university's campus in an apartment for the past year. I'm going for my third year in college currently. I go to a college that's out of my home state, so I had to stay off campus because I couldn't afford to keep moving my stuff back and forth between my house and the college dorms. I met these two guys last year through a friend of mine when I was looking for somewhere to live for the summer and the upcoming year as well. I was a little bit apprehensive about living with two guys, but my friend really vouched for them hard. And the rent was really cheap with them as well. I figured, why not? What could it hurt, you know? I decided to live with them. It was actually really nice. They were super nice guys, and they really liked having me around too. I helped them keep things clean and tidy, and there wasn't really any awkward advances for sex or anything like that. They never harassed me, which was really the only worry I'd had, and we had a lot of fun together actually. Fast forward a year and we decided we were going to stick together as roommates, but we were going to move to a different apartment. One of the guys, Alex, was going to be out of town during our planned move-out time, so we decided a couple of days ago for all three of us to move out his room and some stuff in the living room. We just wanted to get a jump start on moving things into public storage, you know? That day, we were moving things around, packing things away, putting junk into boxes. At one point, while the guys were moving the real heavy stuff, I started organizing Alex's dresser. I was taking the drawers out and putting them aside so I could carry the frame easier. As I was taking out one of the drawers though, his underwear and socks one, something caught my eye. It was a bra, but not just any bra. It was my bra. I recognized it immediately because it was not one of those casual Monday going to class ones. It was a super expensive one that was one of my favorites, and I thought I had lost it long ago. I didn't really think too much of that though. I figured probably I'd just left it in the dryer or somehow it got mixed into his laundry. No big deal, right? Out of curiosity though, I sifted through the drawer a bit more, and underneath that bra were two pairs of panties. Yes, both mine. A slow chill started to come over me, but I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps I'd just been in a brain fog or something and he'd found all these mixed into his laundry. It was too awkward for him to just return them to me. I get that, it can be like that sometimes. I shook it off and convinced myself that must be the case, and went to continue to move his things. I found another pair in another shelf, and then even more. Some I didn't even recognize anymore, which again gave me the creeps. Now I was curious, and even though I felt guilty about it, I just had to look through the rest of his clothes. I closed his door and started peeking around a bit more. I really wish I didn't. I went deeper into the first drawers I'd pulled out and found yet more pairs of my panties, but underneath those were pieces of photo paper with pictures of me on them. My heart stopped when I saw them. Holy fucking shit. There were tons of these small 4x6 photo cards, all of me, all of pictures I figured he had taken from my Facebook or other social media. Maybe I would have given him the benefit of the doubt if it weren't the fact that they were all either bikini pictures or some other sexy photo of me, at Halloween in a costume, a photo showing cleavage, etc. I quickly slipped the pictures and the pair of underwear back in and covered it up with all his things. At this point, I really had no idea what to do. I was so confused and scared, and I really didn't know how to react. I took out the rest of the drawers and put them with the others. As casually as I could, I called Alex over and asked him about the first bra I'd found, the really obvious one in his underwear drawer. He turned bright red and stammered something about the laundry, as I figured he might. He then kind of probed me and asked if I'd found anything more. My heart was thumping, and I shook my head no. I smiled and thanked him for finding that piece of clothing for me. Immediately, he said he'd finish up his room and basically kick me out and forbid me from entering, which really sealed up my convictions. I don't know what to do about this, honestly. It's been a few days since, and now that I've kind of calmed down, I'm really not certain about rooming with them next year. Still though, it's a lot of paperwork to go through canceling the lease and all that legal stuff. He's kind of a nice guy otherwise, but it's really creepy. A couple of years ago, one of my closest friends relocated cross-country with his long-term girlfriend to work a job he just couldn't refuse. Only issue he had was that he didn't want to fly his dogs out with him when they made the move. They'd be staying in a hotel for the first month. He was also a bit reticent to fly them out due to health concerns for both pets. By the time he located a home to rent, he was missing his furry buddies and made the request of his sister, another close friend, and myself to drive them to him to LA. Now, we're all Chicago folks, so the trip would be quite a long one. However, with the three of us to foot the nearly 30-hour drive, it would be a piece of cake. We left early and drove extremely long hours. Along the way, it was decided between my friend and I that we'd foot the majority of our drive ourselves. If we needed to, we'd let our friend's sister do a little bit of driving. We were on a bit of a time crunch due to a snafu with the rental agreement, so we didn't have the luxury to stop very often past an 8-hour stay at a Denver La Quinta Inn. As for the journey itself, it was relatively smooth, barring getting pulled over right before entering Utah for driving 2 miles in the left lane of an empty highway. Oops, I guess. From that point on, we made it through Utah, Arizona, and Nevada without any trouble pretty much. That was until we entered California, in dire need of some gas. I had been driving for the majority of the first day and tagged my buddy in after being pulled over. I remained in the shotgun seat as navigator, searching through the GPS for a fuel stop. We kept our eyes peeled for road signs and discovered a sign pointing to Yermo Ghost Town or something along those lines, which seemed to have a mobile station. Well, that was great. It was convenient too, as it was located almost directly off the interstate. We rolled in with little more than fumes when we approached the pumps. Normally, we'd let the dogs out at every rest stop, but having stopped not long before then, and with both dogs sleeping snugly in the back, I decided to pump gas without anyone else leaving the vehicle. My buddy pulled us up on the side of a beat-up green sedan with a short, plump gentleman who just turned in to approach the shop. I noticed a few other hoopties at the humps, all unoccupied, and there were a couple of other cars parked up near the station, most likely belonging to the employees. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I swiped my credit card. The pump rejected my first swipe attempt, which I chalked up to a misread. I swiped it again, only for the pump to read out, "Please see attendant." I was annoyed, but we really needed the gas. I tapped on the window and told my buddy what I was doing and asked if anyone needed anything. After taking their orders of Gatorade and Marlboro Reds, I walked up to the store. I took a mental note of how strange this gas station was. It was eerily quiet, especially for a station just off the interstate. But no matter. As I walked in, there was a bit more weirdness. The first thing I noticed was that there were boxes of chips just kind of lying all over the floor, like someone was in the middle of stocking shelves and just gave up. As I veered to my right, I noticed immediately that no one was milling about this place. There were 6 cars besides our own out there, so I felt like I should see someone. Things got even weirder when I realized there was no one behind the counter either. No customers, no workers. Then it dawned on me. What had happened to that gentleman who was at the pump adjacent to mine? Surely all of them can't be in the bathroom. This is where I began to feel this gnawing sensation in my stomach. Something was not right here. I've always been a person who felt like I could trust my instincts, and those instincts were currently screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I wanted to turn around and run, but instead I held back. Surely it would look suspicious booking it out of a gas station that was empty. I decided to just try and play it cool, natural, you know. Don't let your body language let on how badly you're freaking out in your head. I was probably only inside the station for a couple of minutes when I left, but I stopped just before exiting to listen for something, anything. Even a flushing toilet would have been a good sound right now, but there was no noise at all. As I exited the shop and saw the car, I began to feel a sense of dread. It was almost like one of those fake-outs in a movie where the hero is about to make it to the end but the celebratory fanfare disappears and then silence comes and something strikes them down. I was about 25 yards from the car when I see this gentleman just appear from around the side of the shop opposite me. It was not the same guy I'd seen while pumping gas either. He was much larger, and he had this very peculiar look on his face. The best way I can describe it was like Nick Cage's smile from Face Off before the titular act occurred. I continued walking toward my car, but when I looked back to him, he was now walking toward me swiftly and with purpose. At this point, I noped my way back to the car with increased urgency in my step. Of course, my friend had the door to the car locked like a complete douche clown. The 95-pound golden retriever was also sitting in my seat. Apparently, my companions did not notice how freaked out I was, or the creepy gentleman currently running in our direction. I punched the window and told them to unlock the fucking door right now. My friend only half rolled down the window to tell me the dog was in my seat, and they were afraid she'd just jump out when I opened it. I reached my hand in and threw the dog backwards as hard as I could, while my friend was just now realizing how freaked out I was. He started the car and drove off right away. I took one last look back, only to see Nick Cage had stopped about a pump away from where we were, still with that same look on his face. We drove a bit further and found another gas station further down the road, this time with a ton of people inside and out. After thoroughly creeping out my friends with the story as I pumped gas, we made our way back to the interstate, which meant passing that gas station again. It had been about 15 minutes since we'd pulled out before. We went silent as we noticed all those very same cars were still sitting in the same spots we had left them, but there was still nobody around, and the man had disappeared as well. After thoroughly freaking out for a few miles, I received a phone call from my credit card company about a $100 charge at the Mobile station. The lady on the phone was luckily really helpful in fixing the situation for me and was entirely creeped out by the story as we were. In the end, we made it to LA and had a pretty great vacation. It still bothers me though. What the hell was going on at that little gas station off the highway? And what the hell was that smiling man's story as well? About 3 weeks ago, my mom told my brother and I this story, which straight up gave me the yuckiest feeling. Sally is a lifelong family friend. Sally would frequently visit her friends and family in Oklahoma. We all live in a small town in southern Ontario, Canada. Sally would drive there, and she would drive straight 20 hours at least, overnight to get from our town to another small town. She did this simply to save money really, and obviously wanted to arrive as soon as possible. Now that you have that prelude, here's the story. About 30 years ago, she decided to head south for a visit like normal. No big deal, she'd done this many times before. So she gets packed up and heads out. At some point after driving about 14 to 15 hours, she started to get pretty tired. Being as this was probably around the 80s, it was a little safer, she decided, to stop at a rest stop. It was more of a traveler's stop as well, my mom said. She would sleep there for a bit to gather her energy and resume her drive first thing in the morning. So she parks in this very well-lit and busy rest stop. She parked right by the lights as well and felt at ease because there were an abundance of travelers stopping and going. She got out for a bathroom break, came back, and settled into her car. About then, an RV pulled up beside her and an elderly couple got out. The man asked her about coming from Canada, and they struck up a pleasant conversation. Nothing too odd. The couple just talked to Sally for a bit. They told her they were driving from the south going north and just needed to have a rest for the night. They wanted to talk because they were unsure if this was a stop that was okay to stop at overnight, but seeing Sally, they were put at ease. The pair said goodnight to her and bid a good trip, and the couple went back into their RV. Sally locked her doors and went to sleep. Around 2 to 3 hours later, though, Sally woke up with this really unsettled feeling. She looked around but couldn't see anything. A few people going into the stop, the parking lights were all on. She assumed the feeling was because she was tired and a car wasn't the best place to sleep in. After 10 minutes of waiting for it to go away though, she says this feeling actually got way worse. It was just a jarry, queasy, uneasy feeling. She sat back and tried to shrug it off once more. This didn't work, and apparently she had every red alarm and instinct telling her she needed to go now. She panicked, started her car, and peeled off. She didn't care where. She just knew she had to get away from that place. About 20 miles down the road, she found a motel and a gas station/restaurant stop. She decided to see if she could get a room for what little money she had. She conversed with the person in charge. He cut her a deal, as he didn't want a young woman driving alone at night, and she got a key. She popped into her hotel room and slept easy for the night. No issues and all in peace. Around 9 a.m. she woke up, showered, changed clothes, and decided to relax for a few. She pops on the TV, and what was on it gave her chills. There was a breaking news story about an elderly couple who had been killed in the middle of the night. The news showed the RV that Sally had been parked next to, that exact spot, at the exact same rest stop. She even saw the fast food drink cup she had dropped on accident that had rolled underneath her car. Sometime during the night, a man had broken into their RV and killed both of them, then left. That was presumably right before Sally had left as well. The man was never caught. Since then, Sally has always stopped at hotels for the night and avoided rest stops altogether. I think I was about 18 years old when I first joined the online dating community. One of my friends had convinced me to sign up since I had just gone through a terrible breakup. I was still technically in high school, but only about 2 months from graduation. As I was clicking through one of the dating sites on my phone, I came across someone who seemed decent looking enough and fairly normal based on what I could tell from his profile. It said he was the son of a local cop, whose name I'll leave out because he's well known around these parts. We'll call him Officer V. We'll call his son Ren. Ren had just moved in with his dad from Florida and was looking to meet some new people. We chatted online for a while, then decided to meet up and go for a walk. We met up at a local ice cream shop and then walked around the downtown area getting to know each other a bit. Now, right off the bat meeting him, I was not super into him. I know nerves can get the best of people though, so I decided to give him another chance. I was a member of the marching band in high school, and we always did the local parades for Memorial Day and such like that. Well, Ren and I had been texting all day talking about meeting up for a picnic or some such after I was done with those parades. When I told Ren we were just finishing up and I needed to get home and get clean before we went out, that's when things took a turn for the creepy. He insisted on picking me up from the end of the parade, and after 10 minutes of arguing, I finally convinced him that no, he would not pick me up and would in fact wait for me to change and get cleaned up first. After I was done getting changed, I gave him my address and said he could come pick me up if he'd like. Not even 3 minutes later, he was already waiting outside. When I hopped into his car, I smelled something awful, something that can only be described as rotting and dead. I'm a messy person, sure, but I've never let my car get that gross on the inside, much less letting a date see it in that state. There were food wrappers everywhere, dirty laundry. It looked as though this guy had been living out of this car. When I asked him what we would be doing for the evening, he said we were going out to dinner, but he wanted to show me something first. You see, we lived near the third largest national military cemetery in the US, and that's where this guy took me. I would have understood, being as it was Memorial Day, wanting to make a quick stop and pay respects to those who had served, but there was no paying respect being done here. We drove through the cemetery, and he pointed out every single grave he was even remotely related to. To make matters worse, we drove through 4 cemeteries, 4 of them. When we left the last one, I thought we could finally get on with the day. Boy, was I wrong. We went back to his house, and I asked if we were still going to dinner. Well, yeah, but we have to wait for my dad, Officer V. He's taking us there. I was a good kid and never got into too much trouble, but the thought of being stuck in a restaurant with a cop watching me was more than a little unnerving. Why hadn't the guy told me this in the first place? As we were sitting on the couch watching TV, waiting for Officer V to come home, R decided it was a good time to try to make a move on me. He leaned in to kiss me and attempted to say something cute before doing so. I immediately turned my face away because of the awful stench emitting from this guy's mouth. I've dated smokers before and cigarette breath didn't really bother me, but this scent was indescribable. It was like cigarette breath on steroids. That's the only way I can say this. Thankfully, moments later, his father walked in and announced he was ready to go. After a few brief questions about my age and making sure it was okay for him to take me across state lines, we left for dinner. The entire meal, R didn't say a single word. Instead, his father basically interrogated me. Thankfully, that dinner was short. After the meal, I texted one of my friends to tell her I needed a way out of this situation. I told her to call me and pretend to be upset. As it turned out, Officer V was dating her mother, unbeknownst to me. So Ren already knew who she was quite well, in fact. I told Ren I needed to go because my friend was really upset and needed my help. Well, he downright refused to take me back to my car so I could go home, even though the only way to get to her house was to drive directly past mine where my car was parked. After that, an argument ensued about him not taking me home. He dropped me off at her house instead, and I immediately jumped out of the car without saying goodbye or thank you. At this point, I was sure Ren must have gotten the hint I was most certainly not interested. I thought I would be in the clear. His tours of the cemeteries and refusal to take me back to my car so I could go home were huge red flags. I knew this was not someone I wanted to be dating, let alone have him in my life. I blocked him on the site and deleted his number as well. The following weeks got progressively creepier though. He would somehow call and text my number all the time, even though he knew I would not answer. He would come to the baseball games I worked at and just stand there watching me. A few times I even had to have the coach throw him out because he was bothering the team. He called me once and I had my friend screen the call and blatantly tell him I was not interested and to stop doing this. He still didn't get the hint. The calls and texts continued for weeks and weeks, and I would even notice him driving by my house at all times of the day sometimes. I only ever ran into him in person once after that, at a local bar and pizza shop. I was at the bar with some friends when I noticed him walk in. As he came up behind me to talk to me, I turned my head and clearly ignored him and acted like I had neither seen or heard him. He stood there for a few minutes in silence behind me, waiting. Then he just walked away, and I've not seen or heard from him since. My friend often tells me how creepy he still is, as her mother and Officer V are now married. Word is, Ren recently got married as well. I feel so bad for that poor girl. I just hope he isn't such a creep to her like he was to me.